You ready to start? Okay, perfect. I think the cue has been given. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Really wonderful to be back in person again. And thank you for everyone that's joining us online as well. I guess it is good afternoon, everyone joining us in person and online. Thank you for taking the time to join us today for our Workplace Safety Insurance System Annual General Meeting. I know that many Nova Scotians, including some of you who have joined us here today, are still cleaning up. I know one of my board members just finally received power as of 11 o'clock last night. And I hope all Nova Scotians will be receiving power very soon. It is an unfortunate situation that's happening across Atlantic Canada. But we are resilient, as you can imagine. We are Nova Scotians, and we will clean up and get back to normal again. We appreciate you stepping away from these efforts to join us in this meeting. As you know, my name is Saeed Elderhali. I'm the new board chair of WCB Board of Directors. And to begin today, I would like to acknowledge that we are in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral unceded territory of Mi'kmaq people. And we acknowledge them as the past, present, and future caretakers of this land. As system partners, we are in the process of learning more about how we can improve our relations with Indigenous people and uphold the values of collaboration and inclusivity in all that we do. Tomorrow, as we all know, is the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. And may it be a day of reflection for all of us as we proceed on this journey of awareness and understanding. And it is my pleasure to introduce my coordinating committee co-chair, Deputy Minister Eva Zappele. This is my first annual general meeting as chair, and I want to tell you most sincerely that it has been a privilege for me over the past year to work closely with my coordinating committee co-chair. Eva is a wonderful, wonderful person to work with. She's been very open, and I've learned a lot from her. As I've learned a lot from Eva over the period of time that I've been appointed, but perhaps, I guess the most important thing that I'd like to say about Eva, how deeply she cares about the health and well-being of working Nova Scotians, and how committed she is to making sure every working Nova Scotian goes home safe from work. As the coordinating committee, Eva and I provide oversight to the system. Our role is to make sure our partners, agencies, and stakeholders work together toward a common goal. It is both a pleasure and a privilege to work with Eva, also with our minister, Jill Palser, and the senior members of Ava's safety branch team, Gary O'Toole. I don't see, or do I see Gary? No, Gary's here. Okay. And Fred Jeffers and Karen McMahon, as we continue to make the workplace safety and insurance system better for the people we serve. I would like to also introduce the dedicated agency leaders who work to ensure that the WSIS goals and objectives are being delivered every day. Stuart McLean, our CEO of the Worker Compensation Board, Sandy McIntosh, the Chief Appeals Commissioner on Worker Compensation Appeals Tribunal, and Kenny LeBlanc, Chief Worker Advisor and Workers Advisors Program, and last but not least, Fred Jeffers, Executive Director, Safety Branch of the Nova Scotia Department of Labor, Skills, and Immigration. There are many others in this room who also play an important role in making work and places safer. It is my pleasure to welcome a representative from the Office of Worker Counselor, Office of the Employer Advisor in Nova Scotia, the Pictou and Cape Breton Injured Workers, I believe that they're also online, Workers Association, and the Safety Association, including the trucking, construction, fishing, and the other retail and automotive sectors that I've also said hellos to earlier today. Thank you all for your efforts to improve our system as a whole. The system would not be where it is today without your dedication and support and efforts. We look forward to the discussion this morning or this afternoon, which will be a little different than in the past, as each of our agency heads will take a few minutes to talk about the key initiatives that they are leading. And this is a bit of, a difference compared to what we have done in the past within their organization, and how those are improving the workplace and health and safety and outcomes in Nova Scotia. You will also note that there's a question and answer period, and I'm actually looking forward to the Q&A, so prepare your questions. That will happen at the end of our speeches. We will give you some information about how to ask questions when we get to that part of the agenda, just to make sure that we provide the same amount of time to both people online and on site. Also want to say thank you to our expert guests and Dr. Jackie Kinley, our RCMP Constable Deepak Prasad. Stuart is a big fan. Halifax Fire Captain and Halifax Professional Firefighter Associate VP Mike Sears. Hopefully he does not have to live in a tent for the next 4 or 5 days, as we were chatting earlier today, but thank you for that, all that you do for our province as well. And our partner moderator, Safety Branch Director, the one and only Michelle Thompson, for taking the time out of everybody's busy schedules to join us today to talk about workplace psychological safety. Our panelists will also offer their perspective on the improvements that they see and the opportunities that do lie ahead. As I approach the 1-year anniversary, only 2 months away, of my appointment as chair, I'm optimistic, very optimistic, for the future of our system and how it may evolve to serve Nova Scotians. We have a strong working relationship with government and with the many organizations that enable the system to work. With more sustainably funded system and an economy settling back into a version of some normal after years of uncertainty, I believe the way forward for the WSIS system is one of hope, collaboration, and opportunity. And finally, it is my pleasure to have the opportunity to share the podium with Deputy Minister Ava Zappalay, and I'd like to turn it over to Ava for an opening introduction. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. And it's such a pleasure to see those of you who are here in person today and also those joining virtually. Thank you very much. I would like to echo Saeed. I know that things have been challenging in Nova Scotia, especially in the last few days, and appreciate that many of you probably are juggling other priorities at home and in your workplaces throughout Nova Scotia. So thank you very, very much for participating in today's meeting. I would like to say, and I probably said this last year, but I'll say it again, perhaps with different words, but Saeed mentioned my deep commitment to Nova Scotia and to Nova Scotians in the workplace. And I do want to say that that commitment was there well before becoming Deputy Minister for Labour, Skills and Immigration. It was actually the icing on the cake to have safety as part of my file. Growing up, I mentioned to you that my grandfather was a coal miner and immigrated actually from Hungary to Spring Hill, Nova Scotia, and spent 40 years working in the Spring Hill coal mines, and raised 2 boys. And his determination was that in immigrating, he was immigrating so that they would not continue the family tradition of working in a coal mine. And so my father was a math teacher, and I told you, he always offered us to go work in a coal mine if we didn't pull up our socks and get good grades. But there was always that undercurrent of how dangerous that kind of work could be, especially in the 60s and 70s growing up in Nova Scotia. And so I was very aware of that. But we also lived in a fishing community. I was sharing with some folks in Barrington Passage. That's where I actually grew up. My parents taught school there. And my mother was a principal. And of course, on dumping day, we all had to get up at some crazy hour, I think it was like 4, and go down to the community where her children's parents were going out and have the blessing of the fleet and observe dumping day. And it was always a bit of a solemn occasion because you could see how people earned their living in such a dangerous way back then. And my parents were very well aware of that there would be some tragedies that year with their they called their school children their kids. So I grew up with that context. And so workplace safety was always something that was very evident to me, the importance of it and the impact when it wasn't there. So thank you for your kind remarks, Saeed. And I just wanted you to share with you that from the bottom of my heart, this is a file that I take very seriously. So I'm interested in hearing from you in terms of your questions. So like Saeed, I look forward to the Q&A and hearing more about what's happening with you in the past year. I'd also like to share an update on the work of labor skills and immigration and to hear what's happening with our partnership agencies. So we've completed the first full year of the new government, and we're starting to see a recovery from COVID. Just reflecting this time last year, I think it was mostly online, and those of us who were here in person had very strict protocols to follow, and we're pretty nervous about being in person. So a lot has happened in the past year, and a lot has been accomplished at Labor Skills and Immigration in the past 12 months. So I'm happy to share with you some of the work that's taken place. Government priorities that align with the work of the Labor Skills and Innovation Safety Branch include work around our population growth goals and psychological health and safety in the workplace. So each year, Statistics Canada publishes the official statistics for Nova Scotia in terms of population growth, and we just got those yesterday. It's July 1st to July 1st. So you would have seen in the media that our population is growing. But officially, we got word yesterday that it's really growing. So it grew by 28,600 people from July 1st to July 1st. So think about Sydney having 29,000 people, roughly. So we added a Sydney to Nova Scotia in the past year of newcomers, plus people from rest of Canada. So there's momentum. We can really feel it. We can feel it with the inquiries, the sense of urgency that we're working with in immigration and population growth. And so our population is rapidly growing. Yes, we do have a goal of getting to 2 million people by 2060. And so if anything, this storm did shine a light on the fact that we do need skilled trades workers. We need more people. One of the things the Statistics Canada report said is that we dramatically lowered our median age from 42.9 to 42.1. So I guess that's dramatic by statisticians. We all had a little chuckle over that too in the office, but I think it's probably to do that in a year is probably statistically significant. I know Saeed is more numbers oriented than I am, and he just nodded. So there you go. So we are on track to have more people immigrate to Nova Scotia this year than ever before. So this month, well, let's say October, we're going to surpass our previous 12 months total 3 months early. So it's nothing but record setting in terms of population growth. So here's the important thing. We can bring people in. We can encourage people to think of Nova Scotia as a wonderful place to live, whether they're from elsewhere in the world or from rest of Canada. But if we don't have safe workplaces for them, safe and welcoming workplaces, they're not going to stay. So the part that I'm really interested in is our retention. And our retention right now is around, I think, 72, 73%. And we would like to see that retention number go up. So yes, we're bringing in more people. We want people to love Nova Scotia as much as all of us love Nova Scotia, and to see potential for safe, welcoming work environment that will help a family settle here well and prosper. I was really happy to see the multilingual materials that Denise has at the booth back there. And it's part of our commitment to make sure that we do have multilingual resources available to our population and our workforce as it diversifies. I also want to mention mental health. Mental health for Nova Scotians is a priority for government. The safety branch is working with the Workers' Compensation Board to understand the psychological health and safety needs of Nova Scotians in their workplaces. This is an important piece of work, and the needs of Nova Scotians will help inform the development of meaningful supports. I had the pleasure of participating in the First Responders Conference when Minister Balser gave opening remarks, and I hope that many of you were able to participate in that conference as well. It was co-sponsored by WCB and Labor Skills and Immigration. The conference, which was held on September 13th and 14th, was the first major initiative following the successful launch of the First Responders website in 2020. Minister Balser spoke at the conference, and the program included many great speakers who helped continue the conversation around post-traumatic stress, psychological health, and the many ways it impacts people. Now, I had the pleasure of staying and hearing the opening speaker. Did some of you here listen to her? Some of you there? Just really listening to her remarks around the importance of making it normal to speak about post-traumatic stress and to speak about these issues. And I felt like she had a world of wisdom to share. And I hope that it had an impact on people attending the conference. Michelle, I see you, and I wanted to mention that you're our Director of Innovation at the Safety Branch. And you also gave a very thought-provoking and conversation-generating presentation called Psychological Health and Safety, Past, Present, and Future. And I understand that that was very well received. Michelle is leading the work of the Safety Branch around psychological health and safety in the workplace. And I hope if you haven't already said hello to Michelle, that you do take the chance to do that today. So thanks for being here, Michelle. The Safety Branch has also added new staff to help support some of the gaps identified through the impacts of the pandemic and our work to support safe workplaces. We saw a need for additional supports for small businesses and new workplaces, as well as businesses owned by immigrant entrepreneurs. The Safety Branch has now added 2 new safety advisors to identify and recommend supports. The main focus of these safety advisors will be to collaborate with our information specialists, officers, and investigators to ensure clients understand what to expect in working with the Safety Branch and what is required from a safety perspective. It is always tragic when a workplace fatality occurs. The Safety Branch identified the need for enhanced support for families of victims of workplace fatalities and has added a new manager of outreach support and family liaison who will work directly with the families. Jennifer, where are you? There you are. So welcome, and I hope people take the time to introduce themselves to you as well. So Jennifer will work directly with the families, colleagues, and advocates of those impacted by serious injury and workplace fatalities and provide information and resources to better support families. A highlight for our minister, and I think for many colleagues at Labor Skills and Immigration, were the amendments made in March to expand the list of presumptive cancers for firefighters from 6 to 19, and to include a heart attack presumption within 24 hours of a firefighter attending an emergency. These changes make Nova Scotia a leader in Canada for presumptive coverage for firefighters. These are just some of the highlights of the work that is ongoing in Labor Skills and Immigration and the Safety Branch. We'll share more with you as our afternoon goes on, but for now, I'll turn things back over to Saeed.
Thank you, Deputy Minister Ava. Again, as you can imagine, this is really exciting to be able to come back and see people in person. And thank you for all the people that are online as well. Great progress. And, I'm just reflecting on what Ava mentioned. I was actually asked by our former Premier to be on the One Nova Scotia Coalition, and I was the chair of the Population Growth Committee, if you wish, that was actually tasked to grow the population. So just exciting to see that the 10-year plan that was put in place, along with the good work of our new Deputy Minister and the new government that's coming in Nova Scotia, is continuing to look at population growth as a key strategy. And now by 2060, our goal is to get to 2 million. So I believe we're well on our way, and it's only going to take a few more people to come from across Canada to join us in this beautiful province. I have done my part. I have five kids, like I was saying to Jennifer, and my wife and I have decided that is all we can do for Nova Scotia for now. So, and again, congratulations to Jennifer joining. She was with WCB for 17 years. Thank you for your service. And Ava and I will have a chat about that later on. So thank you, Jennifer, for all that you're going to be doing for our province. So before I start, I just want to, before I give you a little bit of background and the opportunity to reflect on the 1 year being appointed in this wonderful, wonderful organization. I just want to thank my board and the people that are here today. My Vice Chair, Robert, just to say hello. Janet is here with us as well. Blair, I do see Blair somewhere, and Luke in the back, Angus, and Duncan. And is there anyone else? Yeah, and Duncan is right there. Perfect. And Steve, where's Steve? Yeah, here is Steve. Here, perfect. So I just want to say how honored and how lucky I am to have my board. A few people actually asked me earlier. They said, "How are things going, Saeed?" And just before I go on, my the speech that we've prepared, I just have to tell you that I've been involved in a lot of government organizations over the last 25 years or 20 years that I've been involved, at least in the and this is an organization that is well run. It's exciting to see, a CEO and the executive team that is well aligned with our board. It's exciting to see that our government, along with our deputy minister and the minister, are all in a single collective voice. We're working together to actually, make an impact on the system. When I was actually approached to join this organization, I asked myself, I said, what is it that one thing that we want to do for this province and for the worker compensation and for the WSIS system as a whole? We want to get to a point that there's no more injuries. And I've experienced what it looks like and how it feels, even though I've never experienced it myself. But I have looked in the eyes of people that have lost, family members and so on. And it is one of the most difficult things. And if there's one thing that we can do as a system to ensure that this never happens again by increasing our safety protocols, ensuring compliance with our good team. And I did mention to the young lady that was working in compliance, we love the compliance department and our branch, our safety branch. So I promised her I will say that on the podium. So again, since my appointment last November, I had the opportunity to meet with and listen to many people who serve and who are served by the WSIS system. I've learned a lot about the impact of workplace injuries on people, families, workplaces, and communities. And I've heard many different perspectives about what's working well within the system and what needs improvement. And there's definitely improvements to make in every system. There's no perfect system out there. So if you do have insights into things that we can improve on, please reach out to your CRO, people within the safety organizations and within our organization as well, because without you, we cannot improve the system. And we're here to listen. I think that the system of partners and aligned organizations, we are all working towards the same goals: preventing workplace injuries and fatalities, and reducing the impact when injuries does occur. We exist to help Nova Scotians to stay healthy and safe at work, and to provide appropriate supports when workplace injuries disrupts their lives. In this new era of financial sustainability, and we have achieved huge milestones, and I just want to say congratulations to Stuart and his executive team for the commitment and the time that they've spent over the last, and I was just saying to Jennifer and Laba and a few others at that table, I think not only has Stuart grown into the system, he's created the system and he's helped us to get it to where we're gonna, share with you some of the wonderful sustainability, at least from a financial perspective. And there's a lot more to come. So thank you, Stuart, for your dedication and time for the organization. So I'm a big dreamer, and this group, can start to dream bigger about how the system can evolve to help more Nova Scotians. The work has already begun. The expansion of cancers covered under the presumption for firefighters has made Nova Scotia a leader across Canada. And I was there when it was announced, and it was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to be proud of, our first responders and the work that they do. And this just shows you how this government is committed to making sure that these, system changes are happening and happening quickly. So I'm very proud to be part of that announcement and the work that we're going to continue to do, which you'll all hear about as we continue to push forward on some of the good work that my board of directors is planning for our future. For our board of directors believes strongly, and I want to emphasize the word strongly, in the value of worker compensation and its potential to help more Nova Scotians. We believe that alongside our colleagues at LSI and in alignment with government, we will need to continue to evolve the system. Make our approach to setting rates, again, setting rates, more proactive, improve the benefits that workers and their families receive. We want everyone to be taken care of as part of this overall system, because this is the reason why it was actually created. And chart a course for worker compensation to play a more vital role in our province. We also believe that we can be part of tomorrow in Nova Scotia that is more welcoming to all, more inclusive, more equitable to all workers, and more attractive for employers. And I know LSI is doing everything that they can to be significant, statistically significant in the growth of our population. So all of WSIS 2021 performance measures are now available, as you're aware, as part of the WSIS year-end report, which can be accessed anytime on the internet if you have internet access, which is another problem that we have to work with. The wsis.ns.ca. You saw many of those measures displayed on the screen when you probably arrived or logged in. These measures actually tell a wonderful, wonderful story, but there's a lot that we need to do about the overall system performance in 2021. They also highlight the challenges and the opportunities before us. So the most important measure that you'll see on the screen that we all need to talk about. And it's always hard, to see that number, regardless of if it's above zero, it's one too many. I think it's important for our conversation today to begin with the workplace safety performance measure that matters the most. 20 souls, 20 Nova Scotians lost their lives at work, or as a result of their work in 2021. Another 8 souls died as a result of acute injuries suffered in the workplace. 7 died of occupational diseases caused by the past workplace exposure, and 5 out of the 20 died of other health issues while they work at work. Again, one is one too many, but from a statistical point of view and from a trend, the trend is going in the right direction. And we need your help to continue in every part of this system to help us continue to reach, the ultimate number of having no injuries and no fatalities in Nova Scotia. The challenges we faced in 2020 and in 2021 as a result of the pandemic have carried forward into this year. But thanks to the extraordinary efforts of Nova Scotians, some of whom are present here and online today, I believe we have developed a stronger safety culture than ever before. I think we also emerged from the pandemic deeply affected, but stronger, although the growth of our workforce and a return to full operation in many sectors promoted a slight increase in injuries. And people were off of work for a number of months and almost a year a little bit. So it is expected to see some of these numbers spike up just a little bit. And we also saw a bigger focus on workplace safety. We saw people stepping up and looking out for each other, and it's always the Nova Scotia way. And it's both our hope and intent that the focus on safety has grown during the pandemic and will continue to drive safety in our workplaces for many years to come. The second statistic, which is slightly going in a different direction, is our time loss rate. It went from 1.53 to 1.58. Again, this was perhaps not expected again when people coming back to work. Like the rest of the world, 2021 marked the return of many workers to the workforce after a pandemic changed what work looked like for all of us. Compared to the previous year or years, the injury rate remains very low. In fact, it continues a long-term improvement trend, but it also speaks to the new environment all of us find ourselves in. We commend the leadership shown by so many across this province, some of whom are here today, for their steadfast commitment to keep our workplace safe, even as the very nature of workplace injuries and work itself is changing for all of us. Again, another very important number. There's no doubt that this is still taking far too long to achieve a safe return to the job after a workplace injury. I can tell you at every board meeting that we have, return to work is at our top priority. It is discussed, It is discussed at the executive level. It is discussed at the board level. It is discussed even with LSI as well. So it is very important that we continue to work hard on this number. But we're beginning to see some small improvements, and that is a great sign. Fewer days were lost to workplace injuries last year than the year before. It is a step in the right direction, but we still have much more work to do. All of us, workers, employers, the WCB, our service providers, our government, and the department, work together to reduce the impact of injuries in our province. But I'm excited about some things that I will not mention, but I'll have Stuart mention to you on work that's happening with our executive team and our board. And we just had our board meeting yesterday, and we saw some very interesting and significant improvements happening on a number of fronts, but I'll leave that for Stuart to share with you. And the most exciting, but I want you to be very cautious when you look at this slide, as you all know, the market volatility and what's happening in the market. But because of the dedication of the folks that have been working at WCB, many probably over 20 years within the executive team, and I have to tell you, they're a pleasure to work with. They're very passionate about the work that they're doing every day, and they truly all want to make an impact. And that's a place that everybody wants to go to work with and for. So in 2021, we continued to strengthen the system financial position, achieving a funded position of about 106.4, and the 0.4 is important. That gain was tempered. And that gain was tempered by the effects of volatile markets and high inflation through the first 9 months of this year. I guess the good news, and Stuart will tell you this probably every time you meet with him. I think when he started, it was at 27% fully funded, basically bankrupt. And for the effort and the time and the commitment that he and his management team and the previous boards and previous chairs of the boards of WCB, for us to be where we're at today, in that range of fully funded, it's a wonderful place to be. And that's why we all have to continue to work harder and harder to support the system, because we are starting to dream big and bigger. The good news is that our investment strategy and balanced approach, and I want to thank our new chair of investment, Blair Richards, for taking on the investment committee. He's doing a wonderful job, and I want to thank our previous chair as well as our vice chair and supporting our investment committee over the last number of years as well. So overall, the steady hand that they put in the strategy that was put in place has maintained a stable funded position. Overall, in the first half of 2022, we are seeing fluctuation, and this is where you have to underline the word fluctuation. And if you all look at your current portfolios, we're all in the same boat of the funding position. While perhaps sooner than we wanted, we might have liked, it is not overly unexpected with a war happening, in Ukraine, the current inflation rates, and having a pandemic and coming out of the pandemic. And so we're excited about where the investment strategy is going for the future, but it's been, serving us very well, from 27% all the way up to over 100%, according to the last number that was published. Our investment resolve has been tested before, and a steady, calm hand guided us, and will continue to guide us now. It is that long-term view that helped us reach more than 100% funded, and that same approach will continue to be our foundation for a strong and sustainable future. Our focus, as we all are always focused as both individuals, companies, organizations, nonprofits, safety organizations, governments, and the WCB, is really on the long term. As we move forward with careful continued financial management, we must ensure a system where our financial assets are more than enough to cover the benefit to which workers and their families are entitled to in the future. These commitments are simply too important, and the sacrifices made by both workers and employers have been too deep to risk an underfunded situation happening again. While there will always be fluctuations like the one that we're going through right now due to market volatility, the one we're currently experiencing, we need to continue our long-term view. And it is our position as a board and the worker compensation executive team that we are on the right path. We're going to ensure the long-term sustainability of the system now and into the future. At the same time, we believe Nova Scotia is well served by beginning to consider expanding the value proposition of worker compensation to more workplaces and to give these conversations time that they need. On a whole, my colleagues at the board of directors and I look forward to what we believe is an optimistic future in the worker compensation system, with more potential than ever to continue our contribution to a safer, working, healthy Nova Scotia. And I'll pass it on to my colleague Ava to continue the great news. Thank you.
Thank you, Saeed. And now I'd like to focus in on the work of the safety branch. The safety branch has been working on how to improve the way data is stored, accessed, and used. We're working with the WCB to better understand trends in our data, such as trends related to where the most serious injuries occur. This important work will help determine the top issues in Nova Scotian workplaces, including industries with the most WCB claims and injuries, what the most common injuries are and their causes, and other trends. Saeed had mentioned return to work sooner, and that is definitely something that we're partnering with WCB on and understanding that important trend. By improving how we use data, we will be better able to understand and predict what may be needed and where to enhance safety outcomes. I want to acknowledge my colleague Gary O'Toole, who's joining online today. He's the SED for the safety branch and leads the very capable and hardworking team that's gathered here in the room. I'll share some statistics with you. Every time I look at these numbers, I feel like calling Gary and saying thank you to the entire team, because during the difficult time of COVID, you didn't step back, you leapt forward. And I'll just share these numbers from 2021. The safety branch information specialist received 6,164 COVID-related inquiries since the beginning of the pandemic. And over 3,000 of those inquiries came in 2021. Including both COVID-related and non-COVID-related workplace safety inspections. A total of 3,318 inspections were conducted. Over 2,100 proactively targeted inspections, and 1,165 were complaint-driven inspections. Also in 2021, there were 5,448 inspections of regulated technical equipment and installations. So I want to mention investigations now. Investigations are initiated in response to serious incidents in workplaces that involve regulated technical equipment, damage to property, what we call in quotes near misses, work refusals, and discriminatory actions. In 2021, there were 39 OSH investigations and 23 technical safety investigations. So as you can see, those are impressive numbers. And I would just like to thank the team for their very active and proactive engagement during COVID, which was a particularly challenging time. The WCB and LSI are constantly collaborating and working together to explore how we can enhance prevention and supports for Nova Scotian employees and employers. The OSH Advisory Council exists to provide advice to the Minister on policy and operational considerations. In their first 3-year work plan, the Council focused on psychological health, occupational health, and OSH training. As I've mentioned, psychological health is a priority focus for the department, with work currently underway to understand the needs of Nova Scotians. The safety branch is also utilizing the Council's work in assessing areas where improvements can be made in relation to occupational health and OSH training. The reports from the Advisory Council to the Minister provide valuable insights and recommendations to help guide the work undertaken by the safety branch. The Council has set their priority focus areas for the next 3 years. I'd like to share those with you. First, impact of COVID-19 on OSH, including infectious diseases as an occupational health hazard, and the impact of working from home on physical and psychological health. Leadership and innovation is another area, And this includes establishing Nova Scotia as a national leader in OSH, as well as enabling safety leadership and innovation within Nova Scotia workplaces. And system collaboration, engagement, and inclusion is a third area, including accessibility, diversity, equity and inclusion, the needs of special populations, including youth and migrant workers. So I look forward to providing you with updates on how this work is progressing. As mentioned, work was undertaken this past year to understand the best options for expanding the firefighters' cancer presumption. In May 2022, the Workers' Compensation Act was expanded. The province recognizes the important role first responders play in supporting communities across this province, and expanding coverage demonstrated government's commitment to the important work firefighters do in Nova Scotia. Future phases of workers' compensation system reform work are being explored to further address the needs of Nova Scotians, with a special focus on establishing a robust and simplified workplace injury insurance program. We are in the final stages of reviewing compensation options for workers with a diagnosis of gradual onset stress. The Atlantic provinces and Manitoba are the only provinces which do not currently allow for this, so we are taking a very close look at it. As the WCB system achieves financial stability, and thank you for that update, Saeed. I know the dedicated focus that must have taken, and acknowledge you and the team for that milestone. LSI and WCB will continue to work together on continued reform, considering improvements such as expanding coverage of WCB injury insurance more broadly in Nova Scotia, addressing improved benefits for workers, and looking at ways to reduce rates for employers. The safety branch has been very focused for the past number of years on supporting workplaces and workers across Nova Scotia, ensuring they were supported with current safety advice and procedures and support for implementation of public health guidelines. The relationships the branch has with sector groups, workplaces, and workers is the foundation of our goal to work together to make Nova Scotia the safest place in Canada to work. Now the branch is focused on expanding our understanding of what is needed to address not only physical injury, but psychological injury. The safety branch has partnered with WCB and consulted with other departments to understand what a psychologically healthy and safe workplace looks like. This work is ongoing and will include conversations with Nova Scotians, as the experiences and needs of Nova Scotians and their workplaces are essential to informing options that will make Nova Scotia a safer place in which to work. And finally, I want to mention that the WCB Appeals System Review was completed in May 2022, with a consultant providing recommendations to improve the system based on conversations with a wide range of partner organizations. These recommendations are now being reviewed by a workplace safety insurance system subcommittee to determine the feasibility and timelines for implementation of recommendations. At this point, I'd like to invite the heads of each WSIS agency to offer operational highlights from their organizations. So I'll ask Stuart McLean, the CEO of WCB Nova Scotia, to start, followed by Fred Jeffers, Executive Director of LSI Safety Branch, Ken LeBlanc, Chief Workers Advisor, and Sandy McIntosh, Chief Appeals Commissioner for WCAT, to speak in that order.
Thank you very much, Ava. And welcome everyone, and thank you for attending today. Our partnership with LSI and all of you is really what contributes to, I think, what has been the transformational change that we've seen over the last number of years in terms of our results, which I think are really trending in the right direction. But right up front, I'd just like to say my thoughts today are with the cleanup crews, Nova Scotia Power, construction companies. I mean, Matthew from the Fishing Safety, Fish Safe Nova Scotia showed pictures today of fishing plants that are on the North Shore where their capital investment is completely destroyed. You know, this is a very significant thing for employers, for the workers in those communities, and it really is significant. And it's a safety issue when you're going to a work site and there's mess everywhere, and it's not as structured as they typically would be dealing with. Adversity is no stranger to us. If you think about last year's meeting, We're talking about pandemics and mass casualties and the impact on people. And then we look at this year, we added in, I think Saeed listed them off, a hurricane, a war, inflation, market corrections. This has been a time of great challenge for us. And you have to ask yourself, where are we, right? And I would say, for me, I'm very optimistic. And the reason I'm optimistic is because I think the things that we have control over in our system are all heading in the right direction. And that is a very good thing. Safety culture continues to grow. And I think it's also worth noting that there was, I think, Maureen, it was more than 10%, 11% maybe growth in the economy already so far this year. And so it's a big number. So we're seeing the economy come back. I will say on time loss injury, that we're at the lowest number of time loss injuries we've ever had when you adjust them for the number of COVID claims that we had. And there tend to be short-term claims. They're not as significant most of the time, but it really means that we have the lowest number of injuries that we've ever had. In fact, we're down almost 50% over a 10-year period, 40% since 2004, more than 40. So it's a big, I'm gonna get those dates wrong. It's been a big change, where we were well over 9,000 and now we're into the 5,000 range. So some of those things are, I think it's also important. We have a new chair, is bringing new energy, new conversations with government. Saeed touched on a lot of these things. We're in a position where things like increasing benefits or things like reducing rates are possibilities because you're now operating from a position of financial strength rather than, as you also pointed out, we were functionally bankrupt at 27% funded. Back in the early part of my career, I remember it very acutely. So that's something that we all need to think about for sure. So new kinds of conversations, and you're right, the chair's right, we've dipped a little in the last 9 months, but what I do know is market volatility goes up, market volatility goes down, and we don't know what's going to happen next. Our investment committee is all over that, and we have a tremendous committee that has us well positioned for the recovery, which I believe is coming. When you look at psychological health, I think it's important. I look at it as it's a privilege to lead the WCB. We have significant challenges around psychological health, and perhaps we were a little flat-footed when we first got that mandate, and we realized that my goodness, there's a lot of people here. We had under 50 claims for PTSD in the history of our organization when that legislation came through, and we've had over 500 since in the last 3 years. So it's significant, and we need the muscle. We need to understand how we can actually have a value proposition. We've worked hard on that with traumatic psychological injury programs. We've worked hard on that with the first responders conference. So we're trying to create conversations, be part of a solution. And that presumptive legislation is important because those claims were there. They just weren't registered. People didn't have a way to get the support that they needed. And these are some of the people, as I heard Duncan on the radio, Duncan Williams, the other on the radio saying, these are the folks that run towards danger when we're running away. And there's a real truism in that statement. Safety culture has improved significantly. I mean, I'm excited by healthcare and nursing homes improving. I know I've been talking about how they're significant. We put them on our scorecard because they're a priority. Government is investing. I think $3 million is being invested into the safety and health in those areas, in addition to what the employers are doing. We've got steering committees, people working on it, and we're seeing durations come down and we're seeing less injuries take place. And in fact, I was really surprised. We have a metric on our scorecard, how many people are, what percentage are back to work within 180 days, which is a sort of a national statistic. Overall, it's 80%, but if you look at nursing homes, it's 85%. And if you look at home care, it's 84%. So they're actually doing better than the rest of the province when they're starting to get people back to work. That's a leading indicator of success. So, and durations are down around 10%. So that's this year. So we're seeing a lot of the investment take place. People move from knowing about safety to caring about it. They're pushing into having best practice approaches. We're starting to see the results. So that's great. I'll try to speed it up. We're in a hybrid workforce now. Hybrid workforce meaning that we have people in the office most weeks. They'll be in the office about 20% of the time at a minimum. We have other teams that are in 60% of the time. We've got the executive probably in a little bit more than that. But the point being, we're trying to find a best practice approach to give people work-life balance. And I can tell you, worker satisfaction is up, employer satisfaction is up, the staff satisfaction is up, injuries that are an all-time low. We've seen a 10% reduction in duration last year. That's despite adding, thousands and tens and thousands of days due to PTSD. So we're heading in the right direction, and we ended at 106%. Now it's been challenged since then, but again, that's been spoken to. The Auditor General did a review. We concluded those reviews in 2020. They referred to our board and our process as a bastion of good governance, and that they had recommendations there. There were only 3 recommendations in the governance side. They all were recommended and implemented. So that was, I think, a testimony to the governance of the system. And the operational audit had 9 recommendations. They've all been implemented except for 1, which is in the process of being implemented now. And so again, they said we were well managed and we processed claims effectively. So I think that those things are important. We are set to mark National Truth and Reconciliation tomorrow, and I'm optimistic. It's in our plan. We have committees in our organization working on diversity and inclusion. We had a speaker this morning teaching us about First Nations and the Indian Act and Truth and Reconciliation, and it was unbelievably fabulous this morning for our people to understand, gain awareness, have their attitude so that they can bring it to their employees that work for them and have a real understanding, how do we create the right conditions for people to flourish. I guess lastly, I'll just I'll say, with fatalities, I know the chair already spoke to it. Having 20 fatalities last year, I want to say sincere condolences to the families of those and the friends of those who died. There's nothing more sobering than being in a role like I play every day, and every fatality is a system failure. And I know everyone at this table feels the same way. So I want to thank the teams. I want to thank our teams. I think we have excellent people. They're all working very hard. I want to thank them. I want to thank all of you because we don't do anything alone. It's all through influence and through partnership. That's the only way this works. And all of you are pulling your weight. That's why we're seeing the results that we're seeing. So together we're better. So thank you very much. And I'll look forward to questions later.
Thank you very much, Stuart. That was well spoken, and certainly agree with your comments about the teamwork. I kind of look at this as all of us in the room as pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. We all play a different role, and we can all apply ourselves differently to what we're trying to achieve here. We're all pushing in the same direction, and it's great to have partners like this to work with. It makes all of our work, that much easier and more impactful. So thanks for that. Great to be here today in person with everyone. Just going to share some additional highlights of some of the work that's going on at the safety branch over the past year. Certainly with the support of Workers' Compensation Board, our division has been working with Aware Nova Scotia over the past year on the Continuing Care Disability Support Program initiative. And I see Sue's here today from Aware. Again, another great partner that has really leaned in and made that initiative very successful so far. That work is part of the overall workplace safety initiative, and it's really going to help us to monitor the whole overall program success and achievements as we move forward. Inspections in home care agencies that were within the scope of this initiative have been completed, and I know the team is sort of putting together the results of those to see what we learned from that, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that. They've begun inspections of long-term care facilities. Actually, they're out today. Visiting long-term care facilities. And we're going to move on to the disability support programs in the new year. Really looking forward regarding occupational health. As Ava had reported in response to our advisory council report from last year, occupational health was selected as something that really identified as very significant in this province. We know that it's unlike some of the other incidents and injuries that take place in workplaces in that we don't always see the impacts of it right away. It's down the road, many years in some cases. So it's a more challenging concern to wrap our heads around. Our work has involved an assessment of current and historical context, and which has supported developing a path forward for modernizing occupational health in the province. And we're really looking at things like awareness and outreach, clarifying the requirements, making sure folks are clear on what's expected, harmonizing with occupational health standards in other provinces and territories, and considering the necessary policy requirements really to achieve those outcomes that our stakeholders need to keep their workplaces safe and healthy well into the future. As Ava mentioned, also, we've been very focused on how to support the families of victims of workplace fatalities and injuries. And just to speak a little bit more, Ava mentioned about the new position with our branch. Jen Clark's here today, the manager of outreach support and family liaison. It was added to the branch over the last year. And, you know, the primary purpose of this role is to serve as a link between families, our colleagues, and advocates of those impacted by serious injury and workplace fatalities. The family liaison provides support and information in a sensitive, compassionate, and timely manner, and secures the confidence and trust of families of workplace fatalities and serious incidents. They also ensure family members are given available information in accordance with the needs of the investigation. So it's a very challenging role because when we're investigating a workplace incident, you know, there's a certain amount of information that needs to be held tightly as we go through, but at the same time, we want to try to keep families aware of, you know, what to expect and what's happening as much as we can. The manager's position has a shared responsibility for the achievement of our broader plan and priorities. And with that in mind, you know, alignment with our branch, department, and government priorities needs to be integrated with their activities and communication. It's a big part of that. As well, that manager's position is also leading our program activities that are connected to enforcement under the Act through creative sentencing initiatives and the administration of our education trust fund. So interestingly, with over the past few years, as many of you may be aware, each year we do prosecute a number of cases before the courts where there are serious violations. Quite often there are ones involving fatalities and serious injuries. And one of the pieces that's come out of that over the past few years is a whole creative sentencing model. And we've had some very successful outcomes from those. It's, you know, fines are money, but I think from the feedback we've got, I think some of the families appreciate the fact that some of these outcomes are out there helping to prevent these things happening in the future. So when these creative sentencing initiatives are carried out and folks are out there doing safety messaging, it's the people that were involved in it that can tell their stories. And I think some of you have heard some of these over the past year or so, and they're very impactful. And I think it's having a really a positive effect as opposed to perhaps a fine or some other judgment from the courts. So we've been speaking a bit about COVID-19, and again, to sort of build on what the deputy was speaking about, it has highlighted gaps in supports. So one of the things we learned was that there were definitely gaps in supports for small businesses and new workplaces in the province, and as well businesses that are being owned and worked in by some of our newcomers to the province as well, and entrepreneurs. So these businesses are not often part of large organized sectors. And they really do need some additional support in trying to deal with workplace safety issues, developing prevention plans, following public health requirements as we saw during COVID, and so on. So as we spoke about, we did create 2 new safety advisor programs or safety advisor positions. And the programs they're dealing with, that's one of the key focuses for them, is to get out there and try to fill that gap a little bit with some of our smaller businesses, to help support them in building their occupational health and safety programs, make sure they're aware of, you know, what sort of resources are out there. Just to speak a little further on that, you know, those advisors are going to be collaborating very closely with our information specialists, our officers, investigators, and with the intent to try to ensure clients understand what is required from them. From our perspective, they understand about our pathways to compliance, so they know what to expect if they get a visit from a compliance officer. So this will help address a need among small or new businesses that may be unaligned with existing industry sectors for accessible, timely, and comprehensive health and safety supports. It will also support a growing need among newcomers and immigrant workers and entrepreneurs for enhanced advisory services and opportunities for regular interactions with our division and our officers, plus the availability of just getting good materials and resources for them. Safety advisors will be delivering a wide range of activities, and they're going to include things like providing advisory services to organizations, supporting their development and promotion of best practice models, informing and targeting and supporting targeting businesses on new and emerging hazards that could impact their business, like COVID-19, working in a collaborative way with businesses to enhance awareness and understanding of the acts, regulations, public health orders and such. Developing safety materials and resources on new and developing hazards with input from our technical staff. And assist in developing and managing programs to support our clients and interest groups. And just making workplace health and safety a little more approachable and a little more part of their everyday work. Just to say the two advisors that we were able to, the two individuals that are in those positions they've hit the ground running. It's kind of fun, I think, to start out in something that's brand new. And they've really taken to it and have been doing some terrific work out there. So we're very pleased with how this program has gotten off the ground. Just a couple of other quick highlights this year for us. We did sign off on a national regional harmonization initiative. So the Pan-Canadian OHS Reconciliation Agreement. So this is an agreement that's been signed off by, I think, all the provinces and territories now in the federal government. And it's really established a good solid standard for us to get together and work on streamlining occupational health and safety requirements across Canada. So it was interesting. I was speaking this morning with some folks from Irving, and we have a number of companies and businesses that work in our province and other provinces. And it's really great for them. It makes it a lot better for them, a lot easier for their businesses when they can sort of follow the same rules from province to province. So that's really kicked off well. We've already adopted some fall protection and first aid requirements, and we've got a lot of more things on our plate that we're going to be looking at to try to harmonize between provinces. Really looking forward to that work. And just as well, back on June 13th, as most of you are aware, we had some new first aid regulations come into force. And again, part of that was about the harmonization. So now we're using the same, and the other provinces are moving ahead to use the same first aid kits, the same training requirements from province to province. So hopefully that will make things easier for folks. That's what I have. So take it away, Ken.
Thank you. The Workers Advisory Program is established under Part 3 of the Workers' Compensation Act and Regulations to provide free and independent legal assistance, advice, and representation to eligible injured workers and their families seeking workers' compensation benefits. Generally, the program must determine that a worker has a reasonable expectation of success of obtaining at least $500 or its equivalent in an appeal or claim to be eligible for representation. Workers dealing with the program are in a solicitor-client relationship with the program and its staff, just in the same way they would be if they were dealing with any other lawyer or law firm in Nova Scotia. More information about the program's mandate and operations is available in our annual report for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2022. It's online, and we have some copies of the report in the back at a table there. After a lull during most of the pandemic, the program returned to Nova Scotia Court of Appeal work in 2021, 2022 in a big way. We filed 8 applications for leave to appeal from WCAT decisions. Sorry, Sandy. Since April 1st, 2022, the program has filed 2 more applications for leave to appeal and is responded in an employer's application for leave to the court. Over the past 3 years, the program has successfully managed a significant turnover in staff. We had 5 retirements in this period. We hired 7 new employees, 4 new advisors, 2 secretaries and a paralegal. We currently have 21 employees. And I think it's fair to say our new employees have rejuvenated our operations. In 2021, 2022, we had 697 requests for service. And during that period of 2021, 2022, 2 of our advisors went on maternity leave, which is good news for Nova Scotia, I guess, but we struggled through it. And a senior advisor who was with us many years retired. So we had 3 positions we were down for most of the year. Despite these absences, we still managed to come under the program's target wait time. So when someone calls us to request service, our target wait time is at the most 6 weeks, and we still came in under that number. So I was pleased with that despite the challenges, and our people have returned, and we're fully staffed now. Also in 2021, 2022, client satisfaction survey results that we received showed that 96% of the program's clients who returned surveys to our office strongly agreed that the program service satisfied the requirements. That's 502 surveys sent, 156 surveys returned for a 31.08% survey return rate. So we're pleased with that as well. I look forward to reporting in the future about another busy and successful year in 2022, 2023. Thank you.
The legislature created WCAT to have an independent tribunal decide appeals from final decisions made by the Workers' Compensation Board. By final decision, I mean a decision made by a WCB hearing officer. Workers or employers may appeal hearing officer decisions concerning a workers' compensation to us. We may also decide, instead of a court, whether an employer has the benefit of immunity from being sued as the matter is covered by workers' compensation. I'm going to discuss 3 areas of improvement in the past year: timeliness, diversity, and virtual hearings. Timeliness of appeal resolution is improving. By way of background, a workers' compensation system review back in 2002 had recommended WCAT give appeal participants as much time as they wanted to set appeals down. The rationale was really your final kick at the can, so there should be no limits on how long you want to take. In response to this recommendation, we adopted a readiness model, meaning we wouldn't set things down until people were ready. There was an unanticipated impact of the readiness model. There was a pattern of each year it taking longer and longer for participants to set down appeals. We started to grow an inventory of appeals that had been at WCAT for more than 2 years. This was heading towards 200. Our total inventory was also growing, exceeding 700 appeals. This pattern was not sustainable. It was threatening to bring WCAT into disrepute. Now, WCAT has modified its readiness model. In the first year in appeals with us, we still follow the readiness approach. But after the first year, we can set things down for written submissions regardless of whether the participants wish more time. We also now schedule appeals involving requests for reconsiderations based on new evidence shortly after they're filed with us. This year, timeliness has improved. We're seeing more appeals resolved within 6, 9, and 12 months. Currently, a quarter of our appeals are resolved within 6 months. There are 36 appeals still with us that are more than 2 years, but half of those are kind of waiting for possible amendments concerning stress to the Workers' Compensation Act. The remainder that are with us are all set down for hearings. So basically, the ones over 2 years are either kind of waiting for a possible change to the act, or people have had them set down for a hearing. Our total inventory is also down. It's now less than 500 appeals. The improvement in timeliness is good for appeal participants, as justice delayed is justice denied. Also, the delayed acceptance of claims can make it more challenging for the WCB to assist workers in returning to work. I'll talk a little bit about diversity. We think at WCAT it's important that our decision makers are reflective of the people we serve. We've put a conscious efforts into diversity and inclusion. Our decision makers, they're called appeal commissioners. We have 10 appeal commissioners. 20% of our appeal commissioners are racially visible. 20% identify with a disability. About half are female. And among our support staff, a quarter are racially visible, a quarter identify with a disability. So we're roughly representative of the province of Nova Scotia, and something that 10 years ago, we certainly could have said that. So I'm quite proud of where we've moved. Kind of the last area I'm just going to touch on is just the telephone and video hearings. Historically, there was some resistance to holding telephone and video hearings. People preferred, if they're going to have an oral hearing, to have the face-to-face meeting. When the pandemic began, we moved from having oral hearings in person to primarily video and telephone hearings. This May, we started giving people the choice of whether they wanted video, telephone, or in person when they were given an oral hearing. And we're still seeing a significant portion choose telephone and video. And we're really pleased to see that, because we see this as a good thing for appeal participants. It's more convenient for many to do their appeal from their own home. It's less costly to hold a virtual hearing rather than renting a location or traveling in order to hold it. Also, it's safer to have less driving. And my appeal commissioners are my employees. I want to kind of reduce risk to them as well. Based on our experience over the past 2 years, it appears overturn rates are not impacted from virtual hearings instead of in-person hearings, which I think is part of giving these alternate forms of hearings acceptance. And finally, just going to mention that we're taking part in the appeal system review and look forward to further improvements in the appeal system. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the partner agencies for those remarks. And maybe I'll take the liberty, Saeed, of speaking on your behalf and my behalf, unscripted. But I just wanted to say that as I complete a year, and Saeed almost completes a year, I'm incredibly grateful to the partner agencies in their in my ongoing education. So is it okay to say that on your behalf too, Saeed? Very knowledgeable, as you can tell, and very committed to the entire system. And we continue to learn from you and welcome your advice and ongoing support. So thank you all very, very much. So I just have a few more things to say, and then I'm going to turn things over to you, I think, Michelle, to help with the panel. I would like to mention that WSIS includes 4 aligned organizations: the Office of the Worker Counselor, the Employer Advisor, Nova Scotia Society, the Pictou County Injured Workers, and the Cape Breton Injured Workers Associations. These organizations receive system funding for their operations. And so I'd just like to share a few highlights on these aligned organizations over the past year. So I'll start with the Office of the Worker Counselor. The Office of the Worker Counselor continues to ensure that workers have guidance and information that they need on all aspects of workers' compensation in Nova Scotia. The slide presents some examples of the caseloads and the type of work they have been focusing on this last year to support injured workers and their families. For the sake of just moving things along, I'll let you read the slide and I'll continue on with my remarks. The Office of the Employer Advisor provides leadership and expertise in workers' compensation, workplace health and safety, disability case management, workplace practices, and employment issues. Nova Scotia also has 2 associations that help advocate on behalf of injured workers: the Pictou County Injured Workers Association and the Cape Breton Injured Workers Association. Examples of their work are also illustrated on the slide. So that concludes our remarks. Did I miss anybody? No, I felt short. Okay, that concludes our remarks and the description of our work and focus in 2021. And it's my great pleasure now to welcome Dr. Conter, Corporal Prasad, Dr. Kinley, and Captain Sears for joining us today. Now, are they all here? Did someone? Okay, very good. So I'll welcome my colleague, Michelle Thomason, who will moderate this discussion. Over to you, Michelle.
Do you need to stretch? Do you need coffee? Yeah, let's just do like a half a second.
Great job.
Hello. Oh, good. Okay. We're just getting sorted. For people online, hang tight. We had to do a coffee refill and a stretch. I had an ergonomic assessment done recently. You're supposed to move every 20 minutes. So like we're behind, but here we are. Okay. Sharing is caring. So we're going to do the mic pass. And thanks so much for being here. This is just a conversation time. So a chance, family time. So I'm totally gonna fangirl over Mike and Jackie and Deepak because these are leaders in safety. These are leaders in our province. Thanks. Thank you for the work that you do. You can read all sorts of things about Mike and Jackie and Deepak online. But did you know that Mike's favorite television show is Brooklyn Nine-Nine? Because I don't think he did. And Jackie, just a shout out to the nerds in the room, because Jackie watches the Weather Channel. And she's also a fan of Big Bang Theory. And Deepak is much more ahead of the game with Cobra Kai. Has anybody watched Cobra Kai? Right? Okay. So I appreciate that we're going to use time to ask 2 specific questions, and hopefully we'll have a 3rd question. And if you're online, I'm standing like, can I see the online people? We will have time for general questions for everybody. So we're gonna talk and then pass it over to Marcy, who's gonna open the floor and online for questions. First question, I'd really appreciate starting Mike through the team here. When you think about what's making the biggest impact to workplace psychological safety right now, so just in the present, we're going to be in the future, but for now, what do you think is making the biggest impact for psychological safety at work?
So I think for us in our industry of firefighting, specifically with, I guess, the lens of Halifax and what we're doing is, it's actually talking about psychological wellness. People are really open about it versus 20 years ago when I started. It was the whole like, don't talk about it. You didn't create the solution, or you didn't create the problem. It's not your fault. Shouldn't bother you. And a lot of us prescribed to that over the years, and we realized it didn't work. Doesn't work. So I think right now, short answer is that we're actually talking about it. And when I keep hearing, oh, we're breaking stigma, and I'm like, yeah, man, everyone's well aware of it. But then I talk to someone that isn't. So, as far ahead of we think we are, there's still a lot of work left to go. And, but I think that's actually having the conversation and doing things is the best thing that I can see in our industry right now. Because it's working. Just, we need to work more, harder, good, right?
Is it on? Yeah, okay. I don't know if you can hear me, but yeah, I think I would echo that. I think we're talking a lot more about things. I think the standard with the 13, this sort of standards helpful is a sort of motherhood, but I do think it gives a framework for people to start to think about things. I think at an individual level, people are starting to reach out a little bit more. I think at a team level, I think that we're trying to invest in workplaces and workplace culture, trying to bring more equity, diversity, inclusion, all of those things into workplaces. I think that's really positive. And that's going to make a big difference because I think different perspectives are needed. And I think at an organizational level, I think we're starting to make a business case for it. I think organizations are starting to realize that it costs money, is that, health equals productivity and productivity equals profits. And so it really is a win-win. So I think it's starting to shift. I think there's more alignment amongst different sectors. And I do think the government is trying to do a good job. I will tell you in a minute why.
We really are.
I will tell you in a minute why I think psychiatry and mental health is behind. But I do think that people's hearts are in the right places for the first time, I think.
Thanks. So my view is a little bit different, but I agree with these folks, and maybe to build on what Jackie's saying. And I read this question you sent me a couple of days ago, and I was driving down from the hurricane relief yesterday, thinking, what is making the biggest difference in psychological safe workplaces? And when I was a wellness coordinator for the RCMP, I can get people the best psychologists, the best psychiatrists. I can get them the best treatments, which is all great stuff, but it's very reactive. But to build resiliency beforehand, we can put the factors into place, which is really important. But the step before that is team collaboration. It's bringing the employer and the employee into one room and saying, listen, we want to make the workplace better. We see it across the province of detachments. Those detachments that have a good relationship between the district management and the workplace, the frontline members, are the ones that soar during mass incidents. Those who don't have that relationship, we see the struggle. So it's very basic. It's very human. We need to put, when I worked in the detachment, I always used to say that we can't control what happens outside the detachment. Yesterday, we were doing traffic control in Northeast Nova. People are swearing at us, yelling at us, upset at us. There's impaired drivers out there that almost strike struck our power lines, been trying to, repair lines. So we can't control that stuff. It's all very impactful. But when they come back to the detachment, we can control what happens in the office. And that's important. So it's about going back to the very basic. It's not about putting a person on a schedule of a line. It's about taking care of that person. And it's got to be a two-way street.
And maybe Jackie, you can speak a bit, just picking up on that idea of that relationship and everyone's, whatever your version of detachment, a detachment is, the office, the workplace that you're thinking about. What does that mean to build that relationship?
Well, it's interesting because I was leading into my second part of the question, but no, it's absolutely, I know, my God. Jeez. No, but what I guess, one of the ways that I think we need to improve, I think, is that health is about relationships, and not just relationships with yourself, because you're the custodian of your own health and your own mental health. But we have to care for the health of others. And so we're only as healthy and strong as our relationships are. And so whether that's at home, whether that's at work. And so I think of building resilience and building mental health, and I call it mental fitness, in a proactive way. So getting out front of it and not waiting. I think we think that most of the costs are when folks are off work. The disability costs are huge, but the cost of presenteeism is 6 to 7 times more than the cost when somebody's off work. So I think individually we have to support people and not see mental struggles as character flaws, but they're skills deficits. So how do we strengthen people? How do we get out front? How do we build team resilience and team psychological health and safety? So how do we transcend personal agendas? How do we have meaningful conversations and build the trust and with each other? Because that's our social connective tissue. We're a one body, right? So we have to kind of really build that. And at an organizational level, I think organizations need to start walking the walk. It's not just enough to just talk about it. Investing, giving your managers and giving your people leads, giving them frameworks and resources and things that they need to get out front to support people. So we're not the only ones doing it, because by the time we're involved, it might be too late, right? So anyway, I'll just.
What do you see as relationship building that's causing success and support in your world? How's that looking on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I think collaboration. So like being in the room together of different backgrounds. So when I talk about like Firehouse or the department, you can make it relevant or relatable to what it is that you do. So for me to talk about like, the work that I've done with Deepak and Jackie through another charity that I started, spawned off of something else, when we can understand who's kind of in the sandbox that we're all playing in, and then we can work together to make that castle a little bit better. Like it's that shared resources. Everything costs money. Sadly, that's a deterrent and a barrier for a lot of programming, a lot of care. And I can look at, for Deepak and I specifically, the organizations we work for, it's all taxpayer driven. So it's your money that costs a ton of money to train us to be able to be there to help you. But the thing that we fight against is that same organization where every dollar counts, the investment in the people that are doing the work on the front line to be there for you. If they're not supported, we're not going to be on that line. And that's a reality. And that same parallel goes with your business, whichever line of work you're in. If you're not taking care of the employee, they won't be there and no one else will come and join. So I think it's critically important to understand the things that affect us as we move forward in our careers, give ourselves and our members the support to be able to do the job long-term and reduce that cost on the other end, which is part of it as well, is keeping people in the workplace is the best way to spend your money. And that's the way I kind of look at it. So,
Yeah, 100%. And so just to ask a deeper question around that relationship piece, what you're seeing effective, like the day-to-day, right? So keeping people at work, we are committed to that, but what's working? So how is that being effective?
I'd say in our industry, it's working to a point, but in our organization, we have many members that are off right now in LTD that shouldn't be. And I look at the root cause, it's preventable. So in our industry of firefighting, by nature of what we do, we're conditioned to respond. Call comes in, we respond. Call comes in, we respond. Over the last 20, 30 years, we've recognized the importance, especially folks in the insurance industry, when we do fire prevention activities, fire education that goes out to understand how to stop a loss from happening. When we advocate for staffing in the stations, it's not necessarily just to stop the loss, but it's to stop the other parts. So we had a building burning around the corner here about a month ago. It was estimated about a $3 million loss. We had fire on 3 floors. It extended up into the attic. There's people trapped. We stopped the loss at the firewall. So it was a $3 million loss of what was burned, but we saved $5 million on the other side. It's that same point of that reactionary thought process. That would have been worse, but we were in that building 6 months beforehand and told them they had to fix the automatic door closures at the firewall. So it stopped that fire from extending. Same parallel is if we get out and invest in our people and a proactive approach, it stops the loss, prevents that injury. So
Yeah, super. And Jackie, just on that proactive approach, what are you seeing that's successful?
Well, I think just to pick up on what Mike was saying, I really do think that getting people together, you know, when you talk about the team building and the training or the training and all those things, building teams and building trust and making people feel like they're supported. I did want to introduce the idea of brain safety though, right? Because, you know, when we're talking about psychological safety, what we're really talking about are safe brains, right? And so safe brains at work are brains that aren't in fight or flight mode. Because when you're in a reactive situation, you know, whether it's you know, you're in the midst of a fight or a fire, you know, your brain doesn't work well, you know, and you've literally flipped your lid, right? And so you don't focus well, you don't concentrate well, you're more inclined to have accidents and injuries. So getting out front is creating spaces where people can come together, can be human, can talk about what it's like to be in these situations and circumstances, to debrief after traumas, but then to go ahead and actually help to support them and fortify them and give them the skills that they need so that when they're in those situations, I talk about the psychological hard hat, is building, giving them the skills that they need, because you know there's going to be stress, you know there's going to be trauma. So why send your police people and your firefighters out into situations where you know they're going to be exposed to horrible hazards, but psychologically you haven't prepared them to be able to deal with that. So I do think getting out front, understanding that you can actually train your brain to be stronger, you can train yourself to regulate, to ground, to handle emotions, so you're not yelling and screaming and starting fights. That's bad behavior. At an organizational level, I think just this whole idea too about not being afraid to have what's a social contract, like what's resilient behavior, how are we going to show up, right? I mean, that's not personal. That's just there's evidence to show what supports health. So creating situations where people can be human, come together, support each other, and celebrate, you know, that we're all human.
And Jackie, what do you see? I'm just curious about, you know, I've worked in groups where 10 people are talking and 20 people are not, right? So when you're in a team and you've got introverts and you've got people who are actually disassociated from their feelings, like how are you working with that?
Well, there's a lot of people probably here in the room where I've worked with their teams. And so I would say a lot of them say, well, you know, you'll come into my office and nobody will talk, nobody will say anything. And that's actually not true. You know, is that what you need to do is create a culture of safety. And being resilient means being vulnerable. And I don't just mean speaking your story and everything and just laying it out on the table. I don't need to traumatize people with my story, but I do need to be human and I do need to be real. And so I just think it's really important, you know, for us to be able to create spaces. I think that's one of the reasons why Stuart, you know, likes us and likes Deepak, and because we're kind of real people, you know, and so, you know, that's why it's sort of, you know, it's important is that you create safety. You are the safety. You're the lightning rod. You're the safety. You know, you walk in the room, you create safety, right? And you create safety by being safe yourself. So we're responsible for how we show up. Yeah, right. And so taking responsibility for how you show up and as leaders and as thought leaders and whatever, you need to build your resilience. You need to make sure you're safe and that you're not harming other people. Right. So building your resilience, your insight, all of those things. These guys have training. They know that when people see you, they feel safe. Right. And because yes,
Stuart likes me only because I can get him out of a speeding ticket. Really. Just to build on what these folks have said already, two things come to mind. One is training isn't a foreign concept to any industry. We've been doing training for years and years and years. We're just changing the topic of training. So we do scenario-based training. We do a lot of active shooter training. We bring in smoke machines. A lot of fire bells are going off. We're creating a scenario to give the person the opportunity to, in a safe environment, to build their skill sets. But all that is not going to be good unless it's actually genuine. We hear it time and time again. Is this a checkbox, or does the RCMP really care about our health and well-being? So that goes back to the relationship building that we talked about. There's some great services out there, but if you just throw money at it and you just bring in the best, but it doesn't link into your workplace, it's going to be useless. So you have to have that genuine piece in there.
It sort of turtles all the way down. I don't know if any of you know Dr. Zeus, but it's this idea that, it's not just about, making your workers healthy, and helping your managers be healthy, but it's about you being healthy, right? And walking the walk. That's why I'm a big fan of walk the walk, not talk the talk, and starting to do that.
Yeah, and just to jump on what Deepak said there of, I've seen it many times as well, where you think, all right, this train is coming, it's going to be cutting edge, it's going to be great for us. And then when it starts unrolling, it's like, I'm thinking of one specific one that came to our organization that when we talked to the facilitators after, they go, you guys are already way, way advanced in this. This is for a team that doesn't have anything. And when the facilitators are telling you that, and then you're looking going, well, why is that? And it's the engagement between the person that made the decision and the people that it's affecting. So it's that having that ability to be vulnerable as a leader or as a provider, to go and talk to your staff and say, listen, I don't know exactly what I want to do something for you. What do you need? It's a basic, and if that happened more in my organization, there would be a lot of changes. I see you want to say it.
Well, I just want to add to that, because I think that's really important, because, it's not just about throwing a dart against a wall and hoping it hits, right? I often talk about evidence-based HR, and so, it's, and you ask people what they need, and often they'll tell you what they want, not what they need, which I'm very used to. Because sometimes, becoming mentally fit and strong and being vulnerable is hard. Right. Building mental fitness and resilience is not easy, because you build it during times of stress. So resilience training is difficult, right? Becoming good at something is difficult. Getting your brain stronger is hard work. And so what I would say is it's really important to have proper assessment. So as organizations and leaders, everything we do, measure, learn, build, and then track it, right? So measure, learn, build, track, measure, learn, build, track. So measure, what do people need? Because if you're just going in and saying, oh, let's do mindfulness training for everybody because it's really great. Your people might not need mindfulness training. They might all be yogis, right? So you have to measure what skills do the people need. And there's certain psychological skills and frameworks. So you need a proper framework. And so I would really sort of highlight that, is that having the right framework, the same language. I think earlier people were talking about shared language. You need a framework, because otherwise you're just throwing darts against a wall and hopefully something will stick.
Yeah. So just wrapping up, if Deepak, maybe you can answer what is the most profound shift you can see, or the most important change you can see Nova Scotia taking? And you've got important government workers right there who are listening. So what can we do to make psychological health and safety across Nova Scotia more?
I was talking to Stuart in the start there. I'm from Vancouver originally. I got here in 2009. I got posted to Cape Breton and Port Hawkesbury. I worked there for 6.5 years, went to Antigonish, another small community. I came to Halifax. And I had the opportunity of going back home to Vancouver. I chose not to. And staffing was like, what's wrong with you? Like, you want to go back to your home province? I said, no, have you had the lobster here? It's really good. Like the salmon, But there's something in our water here. And we see this right now with Hurricane Fiona, that strangers are helping strangers, people are helping people. At the end of the day, we're all family. And it's having that connection with your coworkers and your employees is just that, hey, you know what? Let's say we're not Toronto, we're not Vancouver. I've been there. I know how that is. We are Nova Scotia, we're Halifax, we're Dartmouth, whatever you want to call it. But we need to go back and take a step, and that's to make this go forward. We have to go back to what our parents taught us about being friends and being kind and being genuine. I just have one quick thing more.
Sure,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, Michelle. Like, I really do apologize.
Time doesn't exist.
Does it really?
It doesn't.
Okay. You can tell that to my employees who are getting that. Never mind. One of these gentlemen I just met recently, he was in the military in the UK, and he was down visiting some friends here, and he taught me something that was really changed everything. And it comes to the whole thing about being family and friends. So grab a glass, everybody. Just grab a glass. Yeah. So we typically toast in policing or in any regiment, you toast to the Queen or you toast to whatever. We never toast to ourselves here, but this is something unique. So he does this. So this is what I want you to do. The person next to you, I want you to have one person. Oh, hold on here. One person with the glass above and one person with the glass below. And you're going to say, never above you, never beneath you, but always by your side. Right? That's what we have to go back to if we want to make our workplace safe and go from there. So it's important of coming back to the importance of the basics of just being human beings again.
I'll say. I just want to add to that just one thing. Compassion is free, and it heals, and it's energy, and it's a renewable resource. And people say, how do you help people? Be compassionate. Compassion is the most valuable resource that we have. So, be a human being, share it, and
Thank you. Final words to you, sir.
I think quickly, just to reiterate on the investment on the front end before your employees need assistance, before they need help, before they need counseling, to have those programs there to build them up before they need it, so that it's there and they're not searching for it when they get in a time of need. The other piece, and I'll echo compassion. I sat with a member that was visiting last night from Newfoundland. He's a 25-year member in St. John's Fire Department. He put in a claim for PTSD. The compassion side that I'm going to share, it actually, by the time it took him to get the courage enough to call and make a claim, took everything he had. The claim adjudicator said, I need 6 incidences. Can you walk through 6 calls with me so that I can take these through? Then we have to confirm with your employer that you were there to adjudicate the claim. It absolutely torpedoed him. The other thing it did was, one of the calls that he was talking about was the call taker's best friend. So the impact of compassion, it knows no bounds. And I think that if we're a little bit more aware of, obviously every claim has a $ attached to it, but that $ is attached to a person, and those things that they're feeling is real. So that's my last piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Marcy.
So thank you, Michelle. Good afternoon, everyone. As others have said, it's great to see some faces in the room today. So I am Mercy Dalton. I am the Associate Vice President of Strategy and Technology with the Workers' Compensation Board, and I'm going to be your moderator for the Q&A session this afternoon. I am also joined by my colleague, Nicole Halloran, who you may not be able to see, but she's hiding behind the post over here. Nicole is a member of our communications and marketing team at the WCB, and she's going to ensure that those of you who are online are able to fully participate in our Q&A this afternoon. Also joining me for our question and answer period are our heads of agencies, who you've had the opportunity to be introduced to and hear from earlier in our session. So if you have a question today and you're in the room, I'm going to ask that you raise your hand, and one of my colleagues will bring you a microphone. And if you're comfortable, I am going to ask that you use the microphone. It just ensures that those who are joining us online are able to hear your question. And following good safety protocols, we will sanitize the microphone in between each use. For those of you who are joining us online, we also would like to hear from you. So if you have a question, you can place it in the chat, and Nicole will alert me that there's a question there, and we'll make sure that we get it on stage. Depending on the nature of the question, I will direct it to the appropriate member of our head of agency to respond to. I'm going to attempt to have the questions responded to in the order that we receive them. And I'm going to try to alternate between questions in the room and questions from online, just ensure that everyone has an opportunity to fully participate. Also, just before I get started, I just want to note that if you have a question that's specific about a workers' compensation claim, I'm going to ask that you raise that question with your caseworker. Your caseworker is the most knowledgeable about your claim and can provide a more kind of individualized response. And then just finally, I just note that if anyone in the audience has been involved in an initiative or a project that has also helped us advance our WSIS goals and objectives, I'd also ask you to encourage you to share that as part of our Q&A period. So with that, I'm going to open the floor to anyone who may have a question. So maybe I can just ask you if you're comfortable to introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I'm just, guess I'm just a curious person now. I actually do have a claim in, but this is a general question, not just my own personal claim. I was a worker for a company for 30 years. I was an executive or a senior management. I've been at these meetings 100 times, you know, the slides, I was even in charge of the health and safety committee, for God's sakes. But through instance and CEO change, all of a sudden, I personally started getting bullied, which 3 years, I you know, on our own meeting, you don't bully. They have laws in our company about that. I believe in my company. I'm so dedicated. I even worked during Hurricane Juan, for God's sakes. I sent my documentation off. Little do I know, as I worked myself in the company, within a month, I was demoted and transferred 3 times. Still stuck with it. You know, I'm a worker. I managed 62 people. Stress was my middle name, and the better I could do it, that's how I worked through it. But I guess even through an increase on my lowest score again, my leadership had taken away. My ties with HR were cut. My staff, which were very good in performing, were transferred out and replaced by lower staff. Hours were cut below minimum to the point that my health got affected and I had to leave. Took me about a year worth of assessment to find out why, because when you're in a situation like that, you just work, you just do. Applied for short-term disability because, of course, it coverage after 25 years, only to be denied because apparently we had new CEO leadership take over within a year and it didn't cover trauma in the workplace unless it fell in within human rights. And of course, when I contacted human rights, I didn't fall into race, religion, sex. I didn't fall into the 5 criteria. 2-year battle with the legal for the LTD, which I did win my case, but during such time, I do have an HR department and thought for sure, you know, you send your documentation off, they're going to fix it. Well, after I sent my documentation was the first letter telling me to return to work or be terminated. My lawyer obviously stopped that from happening, and I did receive a call when I said told my employer I was going to apply for compensation through disability. Just to let them know, to receive a call to say maybe I should retire to find a job more suitable for me because I was disabled. That wasn't very good, but I still stuck with it, and I needed my vacation pay, which was withheld for me and said I could have it if approved when I returned. I did call the labor board, who managed to get my vacation pay for me, followed by a letter from my employer telling me to return again or be terminated. My employer received a letter from my lawyer saying it's against human rights, so forth, so on. Won my case, said, okay, I'll let my employer know I have no long-term disability. My ties will be severed. My ties weren't severed. I found out 3 months later, they reinsured me through another insurance company, which I wasn't eligible to be because I'm disabled, which I would have had to pay for. So I let my employer know, you can't do that. I'm disabled. They said, okay, that's fine. That was an error. So not only did they cut just my LTD and STD, they cut all my benefits, which they agreed to pay while employed with their company. I couldn't do it anymore. I said, look, even though I'm not there, I'm still getting psychologically, this isn't good for me. I'm going to the doctor, get a doctor's note, it says point blank, okay, she can't return to work. Waited 2 months. Do you need another note? Yes. Give me another note. Fine. You caused the injury psychologically. She can't return to work. Another month. I'm waiting another month, and my actual employer says, sorry, you're going to get 8 weeks pay. We're terminating your contract because of frustrated contract. Frustrated, I was off work too long. Meanwhile, because my doctor says it is a workplace injury, I apply for WCB and I get a letter that I'm on hold as of January 2020, pending new legislation. I contact Mr. McNeil's office when he was in legislation. Mr. McNeil says there is no law pending for psychological harassment. So why am I waiting for 2.5 years for a benefit, which psychologically waiting 2.5 years, I've already went through 5 years of basically labor board. I actually had to take my employer to the labor board. Labor board, I had to take them to Supreme Court. Supreme Court was 3 years. The technicality is that the year to the day that it was being thrown out because it was a year long that they showed, but didn't include my actual insurance, which they cut off. When I asked why they didn't include that as in the date within the year's time, they said contact a lawyer. WCAT, which I've asked for a lawyer, all I get is, because I did do a psychological harassment paid out of pocket and was told it's from reason being post-traumatic stress, which apparently is supposed to be covered under WCB, and contact and they'll get you a lawyer. So I contacted again for a lawyer, still get a reason.
So maybe I'm just going to interrupt here. I'm just conscious of time.
I guess what I'm wanting to know is I'm got a letter for legislation change and pending law. There was a law that was paid out in 2016 through WCB, through the violence, which was, I believe, a Horn versus QE2. So if somebody already paid out under that claim, why is it not pending a law now? Why is it not mandated when somebody already wanting to get paid out by the province?
Well, maybe I know the deputy minister spoke a little bit in her remarks this afternoon about some work that's being explored by the Department of Labor, Skills and Immigration around graduate onset stress. So maybe in opening, maybe I can ask Fred just to speak more generally about the work being undertaken by LSI, and then anyone on this panel could probably speak to some degree to that question. But maybe we'll start with Fred, and then others could join as appropriate.
Well, that work, I mean, the work is underway in that. It's not, I'm not that's not really something I'm familiar with in my work. If you turn it over to you, Deputy, but that's not something I'm not familiar with right now. I don't know if Stuart has anything to add
Or
on
maybe I'll jump in then. So thank you for sharing your story, and it sounds like you've been through a lot, so I just want to acknowledge that. On gradual onset stress, work is underway to look at what the wording is in the legislation and to ensure that if the government wants to address the way that it's framed in the legislation, that they have the opportunity to do so. So listening to Nova Scotians, hearing their stories, and creating recommendations for the government is what we're doing right now. And hopefully we'll have an outcome that will address issues like yours.
No, but it was already paid.
I'll just see if my,
okay.
excuse me, I'll just see if my colleague Stuart McLean wants to add anything to that.
No, I think that what I would say is that there is some ambiguity in the legislation, and we need clarity. Because you don't want to be, like, for example, make decisions, you get a no decision, you get a yes decision, and then it's not consistent. We want consistency. So you want clarity in the legislation, clarity in the policy, and then you can implement those decisions. So
But
that's
you
what's going to
already
happen.
paid out on a claim.
I can't speak to individual claims or what's been paid out in the past. I don't know
So I'll
anything
just-
about that.
I'll take this opportunity. I didn't catch your name.
Sandra Daggle. So
Sandra.
does
So thank you.
legislate.
So thank
No,
you,
no
Sandra. I
problem.
really appreciate,
Yeah,
I really appreciate you,
Yeah.
sharing your story. It
Yeah.
is definitely heartfelt that you're going
Yeah.
through this, bit of a journey that's not working out exactly the way that
Yeah.
you hoped that it would.
Yeah.
What I'd like to do, just for you today, is right after this, I'd like to introduce you to someone
Okay.
to speak to, and hopefully they can dig a little deeper into your, your situation and provide at least, quickly some insights into what's happening. What I could tell you today, just to
Mhm.
ease your mind, is that myself and our deputy and our minister and this government is actually working very, very hard. What I can tell you is there's a lot going on in the
Yeah.
background, and in due course, with some time, I think you will get some answers to your questions. But in the short term, because you don't want to wait until an
Well, it's
act
been
gets
2.5
changed.
years now, so.
Absolutely. So what I'd like to do is right after this, if you don't mind, I'll come up and I'll chat with you, and I'll actually
That would
introduce you
be
to some.
wonderful.
I'll introduce you to someone that can at least give you a little more insight
Yeah.
and hopefully answer some of your questions. But as you
Yeah.
can imagine, we're all sitting here and we'd love to help you, but there's a little more insight that we would like to gain before we can
Oh,
provide
for sure.
that. So if you don't mind, I will come up right after this. So
Like Jackie
we can
said,
continue.
it's people, you
Absolutely.
don't
People
see a
first.
face to
Yes.
what's going on.
And I want to apologize,
Right?
again for the, the situation that you're in, but
Yeah.
as soon as we're done, I will come and have a chat with you. How's that?
Okay, that's great.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions in the room?
Although I run into our here working on the 1.58 block type incident rate, how does that compare across the gap?
Maybe. Oh, they're asking how the injury rate 1.5 compares to other jurisdictions. So Stuart, maybe I can ask you to respond to that question.
For context, I'm going to try to find it while we're speaking. But just to put it in context, 10 years ago, we were over 3 per 100. It is normalized because it's per 100 workers, so it is normalized for payroll. And it's down, as I mentioned in my introductory comments, it's down from over 9,000 time loss injuries annually to about 5,600 last year. So that number is about 1.58. We used to be the worst in Canada 10 years ago, and for a long time, and we've made significant progress. I'm not sure exactly where we are. We're in the lower middle, I believe, in terms of the number. It's a little bit of an apples and orange comparison, because we don't cover low-risk industries like banking, a bunch of the other ones. So if you looked at us and compared it to somebody who covers chartered banks and covers teachers and covers some of those excluded industries, you're not looking at the same industrial mix when you look at that number. But I will say this about rates. This is one of the areas of confusion. You'll say, we have the highest average rate in Canada, or the second highest, or wherever we are. We're up there in terms of how much we pay. But then you start to look at how much we, if you look at the different rates, you look at the construction rates, construction's gone from 1,500 time loss injuries to under 500 as an example. So they have some of the most competitive rates in Canada in construction. Forestry has done the same type of thing. They've gone from, a $13 rate to being quite a bit better than that, maybe more than twice as good. Fishing has cut their costs in half. Their rates have dropped significantly. So when you make a generalization about either assessment rates or whether you're talking about time loss injuries or even duration, the industrial mix matters. And but I'm happy to take that question, have a chat with you when we.
And I'll answer the question for you, actually, just to give you a bit of a photographic memory on the graph. I actually remember the graph based on the question that you've asked. I remember that at least PEI is in the lower range. We're actually mid to higher compared to the rest of the country. I believe the highest number, if I remember correctly, in the graph was 1.74, and the lowest was 0.93. So being in a 1.5 to 1.58, we're probably mid to high, which means that we definitely have to do more to get below the overall average compared to Canada. So I would say, like I said, just to answer your question, we're probably mid to high compared to the rest of the country.
Well, no, I appreciate that. And your 9,000 down to half, I appreciate that even more. So that's curious the number. I didn't want to blindside. Great answer.
No worries.
Any questions online, Nicole?
Yeah, we have a few online. So we'll take the first one from an attendee who asks, does the Department of Labor plan to put more time and energy into safety awareness and education as opposed to their recent militant actions on site? And I'll combine that with a second question as well that's directed towards the department. and they say, when will the Department of Labor plan to start correcting the actions of individuals on sites as opposed to chasing companies for a bigger buck? Those on site need to be held more accountable and not blame the companies that have procedures in place that those won't follow. Is the department intent on fixing the issues instead of creating an easy out for themselves?
So Fred, maybe I can direct that one to you.
Well, there's lots in there. Thanks for those questions. So we have a very broad approach when we're out there on sites conducting inspections, and the main pillars of our pathways to compliance, there's four main pieces there, and one is about the first one is really about setting requirements. So we want to be sure that the legislation that's in place, the regulations and the act and those things that are in place are set, they're clear, and we strive towards that all the time. There's work going on there all the time, and there's always improvement. As Stuart and some others have spoke, we're working together all the time to try to move things forward. The second pillar is about awareness, and I know the first part of the question was about education and awareness and outreach and so on. So that is definitely a big piece of the work that we do. It's important for us to make sure that we do our part to work with employers and employees to help them be aware of the things that they should know. Obviously, the employer and the employee have a responsibility together at the workplace to, the employer has the responsibility to make sure the employees are aware, but at the same time, we definitely want to make sure that folks are understanding of their roles and responsibilities under the Act and the regulations. And we have a team, our Director of Awareness and Outreach, Jen Snares, here today. We work very closely with Stuart's team at WCB to align the work that we do when it comes to awareness and outreach and education. And we're working all the time to find new and better ways to do that. Of course, the third pillar is around verification of compliance. So the other piece that's a big piece for our staff out in the field is to go out and work with employers and employees and go to workplaces and see what's going on and find out, are they complying? Are those workplaces following the regulations and the rules that they should be? And of course, the last piece is enforcement. And a good point taken on the question around what needs to be done to enforce those regulations. And the officers in the field need to make those calls on a day-to-day basis as to, who has, it always comes down to sort of who has the greatest level of responsibility. And there are occasions when it's individuals, and there are occasions when it's managers and employers, and our regulations are set up to help us identify, where those need to go. So points well taken. We certainly are aware of, there's been lots of talk with our industries. We meet regularly with, I see Duncan's here from the Construction Association and representatives from industry across the province. And, a lot of them are saying some of the same things, and we're listening, and we're trying to take those ideas and those thoughts and impose those on how we do our work when we're out there every day. So hopefully that's created a little bit of better understanding about how we approach that.
Thank you, Fred. Other questions?
Hi, I'm Janet Hazelton. I'm here as a board member, but I'm also the president of the Nurses Union. And I'd like to address this question to Fred. We have a lot of units, long-term care facilities that have a lot of stuff in their hallways, lots of violence, lots of trips, falls, and we have very, very few inspections, if any. I only know of 2 or 3. So I heard someone speak that they're going to increase that. We have the highest rate of injury in healthcare, and it's driving up the rates, but nothing's being done to prevent. It's only reactive, not proactive. So I'm wondering if there's a planned, intentioned blitz to go into our facilities and walk through the halls and see all the junk that's in our halls and in our washrooms and in our, I'm looking to be reassured that this is going to be front and center for your department.
No, thanks, Jan. I'm glad you brought that up now. And as I did speak a bit too earlier, with the work that we're doing now with Aware, that's actually where we're at right now is long-term care facilities. So it's good that we're getting in there, and it's not just about going in and fixing problems. We also want to work with that team to, help those facilities build some capacity going forward. We recognize that, occupational health and safety is one piece of the important work that they're doing there. There's clinical care and there's fire safety and there's all the other pieces that they have on their plates. But this is the one that's on our plate too. So yes, we're out there right now, and it's an important piece for that. I know you and I have spoken about that before. And it's the other areas of healthcare. I think one of the things we all recognize right now in the province, we talk about the healthcare system as a whole. So whether it's acute care or long-term care or home support, there's lots of things going on, and we're in a good position here. And there's lots of folks in this room that can play into this. We can make a difference that will, help healthcare in general. I think, Sue, you're here. You can tell me. You told me there were 700, the equivalent of 700, healthcare workers across the province that aren't working today, on average. And that's something we can do something about. Together we can work on that. That can be a way, and that can be a way that we can help the overall healthcare system. So I think we're in a good position. The work's underway. Yes, Janet, we are doing that. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's important work, and we're looking forward to it. And it's been well received, I have to say. The facilities that we've been involved with so far they're glad to see us come, and we're glad to be there. And I think there's a lot of good work we can do together. Thanks.
Thank you, Fred. Any other questions in the room? Duncan?
Hi, Duncan Williams. I'm on the board as well, but president and CEO in my day job for the Construction Association. I have a comment versus a question. I would like to actually acknowledge the work that's been done by Occupational Health and Safety and LSI with industry. And when I say with, I can't emphasize it enough. We were heavily involved in occupational health and safety reviews, new policies. We actually came forward with recommendations as an industry. 16 out of 17 recommendations we brought forward were adopted. One of them was work with industry, to your point, Fred, around education, understanding, awareness, and then action. And we've seen the results of that over the last 6-7 years. We've seen rates come down. We've seen injury rates come down dramatically, and we've sent more people home every day without injury. So I just thought I'd acknowledge the hard work that's there. It's a very, very strong approach. It works. It's working. It can always be improved on, but it is working well. Our members feel comfortable calling now and asking when they don't know. They're asking for help. They wouldn't do that 7 years ago. They were terrified to do it because all they saw was a punitive system. Through that work, now they are picking up the phone and asking for help when they're struggling. They've developed relationships with officers. They have got a full knowledge now of if you don't comply and if you're not proactive, you will be fined. And we actually have been very vocal about it as an industry association to say, we want you to either straighten up and fly right or go out of town. Either way, one of those two outcomes are the only acceptable two outcomes. So that's all I wanted to add.
I'm just going to comment. Thanks, Duncan. I appreciate that. And back to your point, Janet, on that, that's another part of that I didn't speak to was one of the things we're looking forward to the work that we're doing in long-term care and the other health-related industries is building those relationships so that, those folks have some go-to people that they can reach out and we can be part of their everyday program as well. So that's a great point, Duncan. Thank you.
Checking with you, Nicole. Anything online?
So while we're on construction, I just want to take this question from Rob Rowe with the Construction Safety Association. This is actually for one of our panel members, whoever feels best suited to answer it. He says the police and firefighters seem to have better support and processes for assisting employees that are dealing with mental health challenges and working to overcome the stigma related to mental health. Unfortunately, employees in the construction industry do not have the same level of support, and there is a stigma that is discouraging talking about mental health. Do you have any recommendations to start overcoming that stigma?
Yeah, I know this is an area that both LSI and WCB are working collaboratively in. So maybe I can ask both Fred and Stuart to maybe comment on that.
Well, I can start, Stuart.
Certainly.
I think the answer is kind of in the question there too. We're at a very unique point right now. Michelle and the team there that had the great discussion earlier. in talking about psychological health and safety in the workplace and normalizing it and getting those conversations there. And the person online had made a great point. Those, those sectors, those such as police and fire and ambulance that have been doing some of this work for a long time have got some good tools in place. And I know in the work that we're doing, and Michelle, you can sort of back me up on this. We're going to rely on those folks a lot to learn a lot about what they're doing well, what's working and what's not working. This is I shouldn't say it's something new, but from a regulatory perspective, it's going to be sort of new for us. So we really want to lean on those groups and those sectors out there that have done some great work in this area. And I would suggest that, come see us, and we're making some great contacts through our research here. So I think we can start to put each other in touch with some of the other sectors out there that have already sort of blazed the trail here for us, and start sharing some of that information. So look forward to that.
We're going to jump in.
So I would just add, and thank you for that question. There's no question that police and firefighters deal with an increased incidence as first responders of PTSD, mental health, and all of that. And the whole question, we heard Corporal Prasad talk about the importance of building resilience in advance of dealing with really deeply problems. And the firefighters, obviously, Mike, we see the same thing there. You want to be upstream in that conversation, and certainly they're taking a leading role. And as I mentioned earlier, we were a little bit flat-footed, but I am happy to say that we've developed a traumatic psychological injury program at workers' compensation. I know it probably is not as well known, and certainly in other industries like construction, but I can tell you that, CEOs and organizations, for example, there's a CEO safety charter, coordinators here today, Peter, and he'll tell you that there's a lot of discussion. They represent about 150 or 160 companies now at this point, and mental health is a regular topic. Psychological injury is a psychological safety. It is an emerging topic. People understand that it's having an impact, and it's been exacerbated by the overlay of the pandemic. There's no question it's been hard for people. And we heard just, Dr. Kinley talk about staying connected and being in groups, and that yet everyone went home to work. And in some cases, they weren't getting checked on. And, I can say that it's on Duncan's radar with construction. I know with the larger employers, even in construction and other sectors, I've had many conversations about how do we actually create psychological safety for workers. People understand it's an emerging thing. And I would say this about resilience. Resilience as it relates to mental or physical health. We got really good at physical health. We cut a lot of injuries out. But mental health is what's emerging right across Canada. And whether you're not getting sleep, you're not getting hydrated, you're not part of groups, you're not getting nutrition, you're not staying physically active, whether that's physical, those same things that are drivers of resilience are also drivers of resilience in a claim. Because if you get somebody who's out of shape and they're disconnected, and they're not doing those things, this is often when things go south. So we need to get better at this, communicating. We need to build muscle around it. We're continuing to learn. And I appreciate the comment of the caller, because it is prevalent now, which is a good thing with first responders, but there's a lot of opportunity to share those tools and resources across the other industries in this province.
And I think Dr. Kinley from our guest panel would also like to weigh in on.
Well, I'll just
on
say
this
one
question.
thing, because I think it's important, because language matters, right? And so trauma gets thrown around a lot, as a word. And this is one of the reasons I was saying that I think that mental health has sort of failed us, some of our psychiatrists. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm a reformed psychiatrist, by the way. But no, seriously, but there are different forms of trauma, and classic PTSD is different from complex trauma, is different from attachment relationship trauma. So I'm glad you have a psychological sort of trauma working group or task force, because I do think that getting this clear is going to be really important. Is what constitutes it, and how do you actually deal with it, right? Because you actually deal with different types of trauma differently. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there, just as an evolving, kind of area of, understanding. I think it's really important, and it's going to be very important in the future, especially because PTSD has been, sort of come under the umbrella of claims.
Go ahead, Mike, did you as well?
Yeah, I just got one little quick thing. Just where the reference was, where, in police and fire, It seems that we're quite far ahead compared to other industries. Like I said, when I first started, it was, here's a box of tissue on the floor, don't talk about your feelings, and here's a 1-800 number. We realized that didn't work. So one of the things that pushed it from the ground that I saw, and I saw it evolve, and today it continues to, is it's the peer support component of not having, whether it's the courage or the strength at that point to go and ask for help, but having a peer team in play that can recognize things in the work group that someone's comfortable enough to go, hey, are you doing all right? And they look and they go, no, and saying, like, getting to that point of getting that person help. So that component has been huge in police and firefighting, because of part of the work, a lot of us have a hard time trusting people, especially when it comes to something that's so sensitive as, they talk about that stigma of, 6'4", 240 Mike Sears coming through the room. Well, sometimes I got to talk about something to somebody too, but it's separating that physical from the mental, and then making sure that it's all there for encompassing wellness. So that's sort of how it evolved with us. So
I'm just thinking too, at the first responders conference, was it Big Daddy Taz? Like there was a super presenter, and I don't know who online, but I'm just thinking, Duncan, that could be a connect. He's working specific. I mean, I'm being gendered for a second. He's focusing on male mental health, like to get men to be more comfortable to share. So I'm not sure who's online. If I can connect with you, Duncan, I'll send that info.
Great, thank you. Some great insights there. Any other questions online? Okay, any in the room? Not seen any. One more call. Any questions?
We do have one final one online here, Marcy.
Perfect.
So this participant asked, what reasons do you equate to the increase in time lost hours in the last year? If I'm looking at the correct number, I believe there was a slight decrease in 2021 over 2020. So maybe somebody can just speak to some of the changes we're seeing over time in the number of time lost hours for claims.
Yeah, I think you're probably meaning time loss injuries is what we don't measure it by the time loss hours, but time loss injuries are down. I mentioned earlier today, when you normalize, when you reverse out the COVID claims, we're actually down year over year. We had less payroll reported. You remember everything kind of shut down in March of 2020. So we had payroll that was reported that really wasn't associated even with work because of the way people's reporting was happening. So we did have a dip there. But when you normalize it for the pandemic and you take those claims out, we're actually hitting our targets. And I would argue that we're the safest we've ever been. We've had the lowest number of injuries ever. So the reason it was down in 21 and 20 was with regards to the pandemic. And we saw a little uptick, but it's still a lot lower than the 2019 pre-time loss injury number. So when you normalize the work that's getting done, and as the economies come back, we are significantly better. And I think we've understood that the soft benefit of COVID was that everyone got out their health and safety plan and said, okay, what do we do? How do we do this? Now, how do we keep our people safe from a virus? What are the safety protocols? We have to mask. We have to get an elevator protocol. We have to figure out how do we get in and out of the building. So those kinds of things were a reinforcement that safety matters. And we've actually seen residual benefits because the number of claims are lower than they've ever been in this province. It's been continuous improvement over about a 10-year period. But recently we've seen a real bump in it. It's better now than it used to be even a couple of years ago by a considerable amount.
Thanks, Stuart. Maybe a last call for questions in the room. Okay, don't see anything. Any online? Cool. Then I think that concludes our annual meeting for 2022. Thank you everyone for attending and have a great day.
you.